All right, so the next part of mitigation is the stuff. And really some of this is kind of cool, and some is pretty basic. Um, Good old Maslow, this is somebody that in a lot of healthcare and psychology talks about. But we're talking about the basics of human life: water, food, shelter, light, first aid, and some environmental concerns. We're going to look at tools. We're going to look at comfort and a few other things. So we're going to explore each one of these things and a little bit more. Next, mitigation deals with some planning. These are a little bit more complicated issues, which we'll address before the disaster occurs. We're going to talk about communication, information in to you and information out from you to perhaps law enforcement or medical facilities or other family members. And again, this is on a family level as well as an institutional and governmental level. So, getting information from individual family members to other family members is very, very important, as well as getting information from a disaster area into the emergency operations centers, as would be in the United States, or other operations centers in other countries around the world, so that the folks there know what supplies and what kind of response is needed to mount, again, to save life and property. Getting information in, knowing what hospitals are open, which ones are closed, where to go to the hospital, which door to go to, and how to go to the hospital. Security issues, what you need to do to stay safe as the world around you falls apart. As we look at this, we're going to mostly look at this on an individual level, but we're also going to touch on institutional and federal level, and the authority structures, how we are going to approach the government and how the government is going to approach us, and the decision making that's involved with that, both for yourself and for your family. We're going to look at who has the authority and who needs to be the chief and who needs to be the Indians. And then there's the answering of the difficult questions. There are always answers, and some of them are good and some of them are not so good. But all of these concerns, all of these questions are such that you need to answer them before the disaster occurs, not when you're in the crisis. So there are aspects of life which actually limit our ability to make these plans and gather the stuff and prepare for a disaster. And that's more than just the fact that disasters overwhelm life and all available resources. Two particular areas that affect our preparations are finances and personal choices and freedom. We're going to look at each of these. So let's talk about finances first. It doesn't matter if you're the head of a world organization or just one person living in an apartment or in a hut in the middle of Africa. We all have limitations as far as how much money we can spend. And to be honest, we could spend a lot of money on preparedness. There's a lot of cool toys out there, some of which are helpful and some of which are not. There's a company in Texas that develops bunkers. These are 1,000+ square foot living spaces that they build and then bury in the ground, and that will protect you from disasters and the upcoming perhaps zombie apocalypse. There are water treatment systems, generators. You can spend thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars on disaster preparedness. Most of us do not, and nothing in this course is going to promote that kind of preparation. You have to remember that you're preparing for an event that may or may not happen in our lifetime. It certainly might, but it may not happen. So from one perspective, if we spent thousands and thousands of dollars on something that doesn't happen, well, we just wasted a whole lot of money. And this is, again, on an individual basis as well as on a state and federal basis. You know that if the government, the federal government in the United States, the government of your particular country, spent huge amounts of money, and they do spend a lot of money on disaster preparedness, but if they spent a huge, almost unlimited amount of money on disaster preparedness for events that didn't occur, we would be pretty upset that they wasted a whole chunk of our tax dollars. Many things in our preparedness kits, the food, the water that we have, they get old. They all have shelf lives, and they'll need to be replaced. So they need to be things that we can cycle through and replace. Utilizing things as they expire and replacing them with fresh things adds to the cost of preparing for a disaster. Anyone who prepares for a disaster at any level has a limited budget, and that has to be considered when going through this mitigation phase, this preparation phase. We don't have a lot of money to spend. We just don't. When we talk about food and water, we're going to talk about dual-use items. As far as your personal preparedness kit, there are items that have a couple of different uses. Yep, you can use them for a disaster. Yeah, you need to have them ready for a disaster just in case, but it's not something that just sits on the shelf. It has more uses than just in that crisis moment. The other items that we need to look at, as far as limiting our preparations, and again on all levels, is personal freedom. We need to make our choices based on what we feel is important, what we want to do, and what is most important to us. Also, we need to look at what we're willing to give up. We can choose to be extremely prepared, but that will limit our freedom. It'll limit what we can do and how we can do it. It would limit where we travel and how we travel. It's going to limit what we're willing to put up with when we do travel. How much gear we choose to carry with us, what kind of vehicle we use, what kind of vehicle we buy, where we live, and what kind of structure we live in. Are we going to live in a cave? Are we going to live in a multi-million-dollar structure that's built underground? Are we going to live along the Gulf Coast and be subject to hurricanes and really just not worry about them if they do come? How much are we willing to spend? All of these things really limit our level of preparedness, and that's just a reality. Life is a balance, and balancing these things is important. So think about some of the things you're going to give up or change in your life over the years. If you've traveled by air, you now put up with security lines at the airport. I can remember as a college student in the 70s going to the airport and hanging out near the gates just to watch the people. It was really quite fun. You can't do that anymore. You can't get near the gates unless you have a ticket, and you have to go through long security lines at the airport. You know there's limitations on what you can carry when you get onto a plane. You know that pocket knives of any significant length are unacceptable. You can't bring water or other liquids in from outside the area, and you can't bring that through security because of the potential that it's an explosive. Places that you used to be able to visit, things that you used to be able to do, your life has changed over time. There's an old movie where John Wayne plays an airplane pilot, actually I think a co-pilot, and they're flying across the Atlantic to get get to the point of no return. And then for whatever reason, I can't remember why, but they actually have to return back to the airport. Of course, John Wayne is the hero and he saves the day. And there are some subplots in this movie, things that happen. The first thing I noticed as I watched the movie is that people were smoking. Not in the airport before boarding the plane, but they were smoking actually on the plane itself. This is something you just don't see anymore. You don't see that in a lot of buildings, depending on where you live. There are parts of the country where you can't even smoke in parks. Another part of the movie, there's a fight between two males on the plane, and one of them pulls out a revolver. John Wayne, of course, wrestles the revolver away from the guy and sits him down in his seat. Today, you wouldn't have a revolver on that flight. You know that passengers are not allowed to carry weapons on the flight, so it wouldn't even be there. And if there was a fight, they would not just be sat down back in their seat. They'd be handcuffed and restrained. In the movie, John Wayne sits them down, gives them a stern talking to, and then hands them back his pistol. This is not something that's going to happen today. But there was a time that it did. So there's a huge amount of things that we used to be able to do, and we've given them up slowly over time. Most of them are good in the long run, but there's still stuff that we've given up, stuff that we've been willing to give up because of whatever reason, to make ourselves safer. So personal freedom is something that limits our preparations. If we go back to 1960 and implement all of the changes that have occurred over the last 50 or so years, people would just not accept them. So it's a slow process of changing our personal freedoms to what we're going to accept, and it has occurred over time. I recently heard a news report about normal folks preparing for a disaster. Not preppers, but normal folks. Not someone who's out there building a bunker underground or preparing to go live out in the mountains to prepare for a disaster. These are normal folks. That being said, preparedness has become a huge business. You can go on the internet, purchase a year's supply of food for $3,000. A water filtration system for $500 or $1,000. Generators and fuel tanks to provide power to your whole home, perhaps your neighborhood. This is not something that I'm going to push for in this course. It's really not something that I personally believe in. I believe we need to be realistic. You know that if the world is so bad that we need 1 year's worth of food, or that we need to go live in a bunker someplace, then I got to figure that 1 year's supply of food and anything we could put in that bunker is really not going to last for enough time for the world to get back to normal. Hospitals, emergency medical services, law enforcement, hardware items, utilities, everything else is going to be falling apart around us. And at the end of that year, when you climb out of your bunker, well, there's going to be a whole lot of desperate people out there at that point. So if you're moving in that direction and you're this paranoid about what may or may not happen, congratulations, you're a prepper. And these lectures are not for you. Preppers are on the extreme side of this as individuals. Most of us just don't have the time, we don't have the money, or the energy to really take things that far. What we plan, what we gather, what we put together, we should be able to use for more than just a disaster. For instance, we're going to talk about water filtration. There are things that I'm going to recommend that are things that you could use on a camping trip for you or for your family. If you want to go backpacking and you don't want to haul gallons and gallons of water with you, there are devices that you can use that will filter water and make it safe. These are the same things that can be used in a disaster for a few days, even a few weeks. So more on this when we get into the section on actual personal preparedness.